With just 2 successful films under their belt, it would seem that the people at Blue Sky is ready to move forward and create a new film that can keep them afloat. Maybe they can create another original animated movie that is sure to be a smash hit with both the critics and the audience. A movie that no other animated studio has ever done before in their life. A movie that will show the world what Blue Sky Studios is capable of. Or they can just play it safe and create a sequel based on one of their already existing properties. They chose the latter option when the studio decided to create their first ever sequel to Ice Age, and first ever sequel in general with Ice Age, The Meltdown. Sometime after the events of the first movie, Manny, Sid, and Diego soon find out that all the animals in their valley are in danger of being flooded when the ice around them starts to melt. On the word of a vulture, the animals set out to the far end of the valley to use a giant dead tree as a boat in order to survive. While on the journey, Manny begins to have an identity crisis when some of the animals have pointed out that he is the last living mammoth on Earth and that his species is near extinction. However, he soon meets a girl mammoth named Ellie, who thinks that she is actually a possum due to being raised by a possum family when she was younger. Soon, Ellie and her adopted brothers, Crash and Eddie, join the herd to make it to the boat, and Manny tries to convince Ellie that she is a mammoth and that they must be together for the sake of their species. After the first Ice Age was released in 2002, Chris Meledandri has stated that Blue Sky would potentially do a sequel, and by June of that year, production on The Meltdown has commenced. Heck, a majority of people who worked on the first movie were on board with the sequel. Like Lori Forte, who already signed a multi-year contract with Fox Feature Films, and Diego's voice actor, Dennis Leary, had actually hoped to reprise his role as the saber-toothed cat. The team were hoping to get a November 2005 release of Ice Age 2, but due to the national disaster of Hurricane Katrina and the release of Blue Sky's previous film, Robots, being in 2005, it got pushed to March of 2006. When the movie was first announced, it was originally titled Ice Age 2. Eventually, it was renamed Ice Age 2, The Meltdown, but later on its final title was Ice Age, The Meltdown. However, its release in the countries of Mexico, Ireland, Australia, and the United Kingdom kept the title Ice Age 2, The Meltdown. For the plotline with the boat, it's likely the team at Blue Sky took inspiration from the story of Noah and the Ark from the book of Genesis in the Bible. At one point, there was even going to be a scene where the vulture from before would disallow mateless animals entry to the boat in order for the Ark parody to be more on the nose. Though whether or not the references to the Noah's Ark story were what Blue Sky was going for is debatable, since Ellen E. Moore, a teacher at the University of Washington, Tacoma, citing that the similarities between the movie and the Bible story was proof that the animals largely travel either as pairs or as couples with offspring. She also ties these religious themes into what she thinks as the movie's denial of a fully back anthropogenic climate change. Another plot element for the boat that was ultimately scrapped was that the boat was going to be made by humans, and Roshan, the baby from the first movie, was planned to make an appearance. However, the team felt that it was best to not include any mention of humans. Not just in this movie, but for the remainder of the franchise, as no mention or sight of humans was ever put in the remaining Ice Age movies. With the exception of the Buck Wild spin-off, but I digress. Anywho, the movie's villains, 2 aquatic and prehistoric reptiles named Cretaceous and Maelstrom, went through some revisions. There was originally going to be a 3rd member of their group, and this cut monster would have had the appearance of an exotic amphibian called an axolotl. They were also planned to have voices, but like with Scrat from the first movie, the filmmakers decided they were better off being voiceless, and they instead speak in typical animal growls, which were provided by sound designer Nicholas David Inhofe. One last idea was that there would be no antagonist for our heroes to go up against, but Blue Sky felt as though the story wouldn't work without a villain, so Cretaceous and Maelstrom stayed. To anyone who saw the film, you may seem to remember a certain musical number shown just before the protagonists reach the boat when they walk past a flock of vultures.
Food, glorious food. We're anxious to try it.
Yep, directly out of the musical, Oliver, a flock of vultures sing about how they plan on eating the main characters, and it serves no other purpose to the movie beyond having a little bit of levity before the more dramatic stuff with the flood happens. However, there's a reason why this scene is in the movie. You see, there was going to be a long travel montage that took place between the scene where the mini-sloths kidnap and attempt to sacrifice Sid, and the scene where the characters are at the geysers that stood in their way to get to the boat. But the filmmakers found the montage boring to sit through, so they created this scene for the sake of fun. Scrat also went through some changes. For instance, that scene where he single-handedly fought off an entire swarm of piranhas that was used in one of the trailers was supposed to be at the start of the movie, but it was reworked into a later scene because the directors thought it took up too much time. The same reason also applies to a scene where he contends with a condor chick. Also, he was supposed to join the herd at the end of the movie, but it was decided that he worked better as an independent character with his own side stories. There was also supposed to be a new teenage saber-toothed tiger named Joe Jr., but he was cut most likely to focus on the mammoth's relationship. For the animation, improvements in fur simulations that were created since the first movie required the animators to make subtle modifications in the original characters' models. Also, the entire movie's animation was done in a hasty 8 months. When designing Crash and Eddie, Peter DeSev took inspiration from other small rodents like meerkats and prairie dogs. For the movie's score, John Powell came back to Blue Sky and decided to direct the music and replace the composer for the first movie, David Newman. As for the new actors in the movie, Jay Leno gives his character Fast Tony, a slick con man charm. Funny enough, to anyone who remembers from my previous video, Sid was going to be a con artist in the first Ice Age. I guess they didn't want this idea to go to waste. Leno also previously voiced a robot fire hydrant in Robots. Also, in a similar situation to Ewan McGregor as Rodney from Robots, this was the first voice acting credit for Will Arnett, who plays the Vulture. Heck, I can hear a majority of the future animated characters Arnett voices in the Vulture.
The more of you die, the better I eat. Wow, look at you. I know what you're thinking. First day in prison, you want to take down the toughest guy in the yard. Well, I'd like to see you try.
Buddy, watch him. And keep him away from sharp objects. No, not the sneezing Why do they always use the sneezing picture?
Whoa. Let me tell you something, Jay-Bird. Batman doesn't do ships.
Also, Queen Latifah, the voice of Ellie, pitched the idea of a flashback scene when Ellie was younger, and adopted by the Possums when the directors planned for Manny to have another flashback involving him having a conflict with his first family. To promote the movie 5 days before it was released in America, Sid appeared on Fox's animation Domination to introduce the shows that night, and Scrat appeared in a 15-second clip of the Family Guy episode.
No! Bad squirrel! Those are my nuts! My nuts! You're just a hungry little fella, aren't you? But those are my nuts! Ah, no! Oh, God, no! My nuts! My nuts!
These clips would later appear in the movie's DVD feature. Ice Age 2 had a short premiere on March 19, 2006 at the Mans Grauman Chinese Theater in Los Angeles, California. When it got a wider release 12 days later on March 31st, the reaction was more of a mix. It was given average reviews from critics and audiences, with a 56% on Rotten Tomatoes. Some people like the film and consider it an okay follow-up to Ice Age. Others, though, feel as though the sequel could not measure up to the first one's standards. Roger Ebert gave the movie 2.5 stars out of 4, and stated that the first Ice Age movie more or less exhausted these characters and their world, and the Meltdown doesn't add much. Despite this, the movie found a success at the box office as it earned $667 million, twice from what the first movie made, against an $80 million budget. It was ranked number 3 in the highest-grossing animated movies of 2006, falling behind Pixar's Cars and Warner Bros.' Happy Feet. It also managed to get a tie-in video game that was made by Vivendi Universal Games and released on Game Boy Advance, Nintendo DS, Xbox, Microsoft Windows, Nintendo GameCube and PlayStation 2 on March 14th before the movie, and on Wii in December, sometime after the movie came out on home video. The console version had you play as Scrat, as he navigates through various scenes that were and weren't featured in the movie. Like the movie, the video game was also met with lukewarm reviews, with each version of the game having its own score on GameSpot. Circling back to the movie coming out on home video on November 21st, 2006, the movie was released on Blu-ray and DVD across North America, but other countries such as Argentina, Bulgaria, Czech Republic, Estonia, Italy, Japan, Korea, Poland, and Russia released it on VHS. The DVD also included an animated short for Scrat called No Time for Nuts, where Scrat would go on a time-traveling adventure when trying to retrieve his acorn. The short was nominated for the 2007 Academy Award for Best Animated Short Film, and also won an Annie Award. I would also like to apologize for forgetting to mention the other Scrat short that came out when the first Ice Age was released on VHS and DVD, Gone Nutty, where Scrat finds himself caught in an avalanche of acorns after trying to bury his personal one within the tree that contained them. One last thing to note is that No Time for Nuts is that 9 years later in 2015, it was updated by the Canadian animation studio SimXI Works and dubbed No Time for Nuts in 4D, where additional footage for the short was shown, with one scene featuring the herd having dialogue. Now, for my personal thoughts on the movie. Well, back when it was first announced, I was pretty obsessed with seeing it. I guess the obsession first started when my family went to see Cheaper by the Dozen 2 on New Year's Eve of 2005. I saw a hanging banner promoting the movie above the concession stand in the theater, and even saw the trailer in the theater room we went into. Over the next 89 days, I just could not stop thinking about seeing the movie. When I finally saw it, I enjoyed it, and kind of still do to this day. It's also the first Blue Sky film I saw when a new theater opened up in my hometown. Before then, me and my family would have to travel an hour away to a movie theater we often frequented, though I had to wait until Christmas to get it on DVD. Suffice to say, Ice Age 2 may not have been a meltdown of success, but it did manage to melt the hearts of everyone who enjoyed its simplicity. Before I talk about the next film Blue Sky made after Ice Age 2, I'd like to talk about one of the most famous children's books authors known to man, Theodore Seuss Geisel, or to anyone who knows him better by his pen name, Dr. Seuss. This guy has created an entire batch of children's books that are filled to the brim with rhymes like no other. A majority of those books were made into animated short films that often appeared on television throughout the 1960s and beyond. Film-wise, though, well, at the start of the millennium, long after Seuss kicked the bucket, it seemed like the good doctor's works were about to be turned into blockbuster masterpieces. However, it didn't take long for that dream to die. Two of Seuss's works were made into live-action films, How the Grinch Stole Christmas, which was released in 2000, and The Cat in the Hat, which was released in 2003. However, going back to what I said about the dream of Dr. Seuss movies being masterpieces dying, the latter movie ended up seemingly being the cause of that, as the reviews The Cat in the Hat got from both critics and audiences were extremely negative, alongside Seuss's then-living widow, Audrey, who considered the movie to be such an insult to her late husband's work that, as the executor of Seuss's estate, she put a complete ban on her late husband's works being made into live-action films from here on out. That one is more of a loose adaptation. However, Audrey did not issue the same restrictions for animated films, so her husband's stories being turned into movies wasn't completely off the table. This gave Blue Sky the opportunity to create their next film based on one of Dr. Seuss's most popular books and the first to ever be adapted into an animated film with Horton Hears a Who. It's the story of Horton, a carefree elephant who lives in the jungle of Newell. One day, Horton hears a voice coming from a small speck of dust and uses a clover to keep it safe. On the speck lies the town of Whoville, filled with hairy human-like creatures called Whos. Pretty soon, Horton ends up conversing with the mayor of Whoville, Ned McDodd, and to ensure the safety of their world, Horton decides to journey to the top of Mount Newell to put the speck on a sunflower. But he will have to avoid his fellow animals, who believe that he has gone crazy to think that there are people on that speck. Before the movie's production, Chris Meledandri, art director for Robots, Steve Martino, and story consultant Jimmy Hayward had a meeting with Audrey in 2005 to acquire the film rights to Horton Hears a Who, and presented her a model of Horton and some animation tests made by Martino and Hayward. Audrey soon concurred on a 7-figure deal for both this movie and the original book's prequel, Horton Hatches the Egg. However, since Blue Sky is closed down, it's safe to say that the latter book won't get a film adaptation anytime in the foreseeable future. Moving on, Audrey was hired to be the film's supervising producer, while Martino and Hayward were given the jobs as the movie's co-directors, while screenwriters Cinco Paul and Ken Dario were tasked to write the screenplay, and a release date of early 2008 was set. Audrey decided to give the people at Blue Sky full access to Dr. Seuss's archives, most likely in order to bring out that Seussian charm for the movie. These archives included the Good Doctor's original sketches, 3D sculptures, Seuss's work that was done for the 1953 film, The 5,000 Fingers of Dr. T, and memos that Seuss traded with Warner Brothers animator Chuck Jones during the making of the 1966 animated adaptation of How the Grinch Stole Christmas. To get the references in the character animation, the animators recorded themselves performing the script in an acting room to find out if their body language could translate well into the movie. When animating Horton, the people at Blue Sky wanted him to be different from the mammoths in the Ice Age films. They did this by making some scenes of Horton walking on 2 legs like a bipedal animal, thus making it look as if Horton is just a man in an elephant costume. The 3D wireframe they used when creating the characters allowed Horton to be animated differently from his book counterpart, like how his mouth is bigger in order to bring out facial expressions. The animators even noticed that in the original book, Horton's design varied with his emotions. If anyone here is a Dr. Seuss fanatic, then you may notice some Easter eggs hidden throughout the film that pay homage to Seuss's other works. The character of Morton was named after the baby elephant bird in Horton Hatches the Egg, alongside how Horton's 100% faith speech was actually a line from the same book.
I meant what I said, and I said what I meant. And an elephant's faithful 100%.
Green eggs from Green Eggs and Ham are shown during the breakfast scene in the mayor's house. Some of the trees shown in the movie resemble the Truffalaw trees from the Lorax, and in at least 2 points in the movie, the name Thidwick from Thidwick the Big-Hearted Moose is heard.
Rhodey! Mom, be careful! My best friend Thidwick lives on that.
Oh! Thidwick, no.
Horton was supposed to be voiced by Eddie Murphy, but Murphy turned the role down, and the role was immediately taken by famed comedian Jim Carrey. 2 interesting things to note about Jim is that, and sorry to once again repeat myself, this is his first voice role in an animated production. And on a lesser note, the same principle applies to Jonah Hill, the voice of Tommy. The other is that this is his second collaboration with Steve Carell, the voice of the mayor, as they both worked together in the 2003 comedy Bruce Almighty. Originally, Jamie Lee Curtis was supposed to be the voice of the sour kangaroo and even recorded half of the lines, but she quit due to creative differences with the storyboard artists and was replaced by Carol Burnett. Speaking of kangaroo, she was originally going to face consequences for almost killing the Who's, but the filmmakers decided that this went against Dr. Seuss's legacy, as he created his books for the purpose of peace and friendship, which is also why one scene where she burns down Horton's hut was also canned. One of the voice actors of the movie, Dan Fogler, plays 2 important roles, the first being the leader of the Wickersham Monkeys, Yummo, and the other being the chairman of the Whoville Council. Also, the mayor's son, Jojo, was originally going to speak a lot more, and he would have his own side plot. But I guess Blue Sky wanted to follow the book character's traditional silent role. Speaking of Jojo, before Jesse McCartney was cast, other actors like Michael Cera, Andrew Garfield, Josh Hutcherson, Frankie Muniz, Mitchell Musso, Haley Joel Osment, and Anton Yelchin were considered for him. Ironically, even though McCartney is a well-known singer, he did not voice Jojo singing at the end of the Can't Fight This Feeling Anymore musical number at the movie's conclusion. This was the work of another singer named Fletcher Sheridan. Speaking of that scene, it was included because the directors didn't want the original ending of the movie where Horton is seen saying goodbye to the Who's forever when he puts them on the sunflower because it was rather bittersweet. The movie also got a G rating, which, on a minor note, made it so that the film is the only G-rated animated film that Jonah Hill and Morton's voice actor Seth Rogen worked on. One last thing I want to mention is that the film's narration was done by American TV writer Charles Osgood, who is best known for being the second host of the news show, CBS Sunday Morning, until his death in 2016. When the movie was released on March 14, 2008, it ultimately proved that Blue Sky is capable of making original content that the audience can enjoy. It got positive reviews from viewers, with a 79% on Rotten Tomatoes. A writer for The Hollywood Reporter, Kirk Honey, even called the movie a delight, brimming with colorful, elastic characters and bountiful wit. And a writer of Variety, John Anderson, wrote, "The real stars of the movie are the animators who imbue even the overgrowth in Horton's jungle with a certain floppy Seuss-ishness." For the box office, the film grossed out $299 million on an $85 million budget, with $154.5 million coming from the United States and Canada, and the other $145 million from the other countries it was released in. On its opening weekend, after grossing $45 million in 3,954 theaters, it became the #1 movie at the box office and had the fourth largest opening, behind the first two Ice Age films and the movie 300. The movie also won an ASCAP award for top box office hits, and was also nominated for an Annie Award for these categories: Best Animated Effects, Best Character Animation in a Feature Production, Best Character Design in an Animated Feature Production, Best Music in an Animated Feature Production, Best Writing in an Animated Feature Production, Golden Trailer Award for Best Animation, an IFMCA Award for Best Original Score for an Animated Feature Film, a Golden Reel Award for Best Sound Editing, an OFCS Award for Best Animated Feature, a Satellite Award for both Best Motion Picture and Best Original Score, and a Young Artist Award for Best Performance in a voiceover role that was meant for 3 young actresses in the movie, who were Selena Gomez and Shelby Adamowski, who voiced 2 of the mayor's 96 daughters, and Joey King, who voiced the young yak Katie. Nearly 9 months later, during the Christmas season, the film was released on DVD and Blu-ray on December 9th. 3 versions of the DVD include a single disc edition, a 2-disc special edition, and a gift set packaged with a Horton plush. All 3 of these included an Ice Age short called Surviving Sid, where Sid would chaperone a group of young animals during a camping trip. But let's just say his camping skills leave much to be desired. Anyway, now let's talk about my personal relationship with this movie. Well, before I saw the movie months prior to its release, I managed to watch the original Chuck Jones short adaptation of the original book. And let me tell you, after seeing how everyone doubts both Horton and the short's version of the mayor, Dr. Hoovy, I was a little nervous. However, I still wanted to see it, and when I saw the movie on the Sunday of its opening weekend after I attended my local church, I found it to be a very enjoyable film and was on pins and needles waiting for the movie's DVD release. So much so that I watched the movie on a prototype streaming website during the summer of 2008. I don't really remember how I got the movie, if I bought it in a store or got it for Christmas, but I still own a copy regardless. Also, it was the first Blue Sky film I saw after me, and my family relocated to a new home after moving away from our old one 4 months before, in November of 2007. Over time, my obsession with the movie died down, but I still enjoy the movie for what it is. And now, my dear viewers, this is where my segment must stop. I hope you liked this movie, especially when Jojo yelled yup. Oh, and to any naysayer who think the story is a big fall, a story is a story, no matter how tall. One year after Horton Hears a Who, Blue Sky decided once again to go the safe route and do another Ice Age sequel. This one being titled Ice Age: Dawn of the Dinosaurs. In this third installment of the Ice Age franchise, Manny and Ellie are expecting a baby, and this leaves Sid and Diego feeling like third wheels. Diego because he feels as though he is not cut out for family life, and as a result, considers leaving the herd, and Sid for feeling as though Manny and Ellie won't want him around as much. Soon, Sid ends up finding 3 unhatched eggs in an underground ice cave and decides to adopt them in order to have a family of his own. However, the eggs eventually hatch to reveal 3 baby T-Rex dinosaurs, and eventually their real mother comes looking for them and brings Sid alongside with her. The herd then venture down below in order to save Sid, and soon discover that an entire world of dinosaurs has been lying just beneath them, and they are soon helped by an eccentric weasel named Buck. Meanwhile, Scrat ends up meeting and falling for a female saber-toothed squirrel named Scrat-Tay, and is eventually put in a position where he would have to choose either his love for his iconic acorn or this new squirrel. When making this movie, the people at Blue Sky decided that they wanted to do a more what-if adventure, and threw around ideas like finding King Kong or a Shangri-La in the middle of snow, and dinosaurs were added into the story. Peter DeSev enjoyed this idea, since he could not think of any other giant animal to add into the story. The Lost World idea led to the team to create a bunch of colorful-looking dinosaurs. This was because, to quote DeSev, "The dinosaurs didn't have to be just brown, and you can take liberties because no one knows what color they were." The movie's original title was Ice Age: A New Beginning, but the filmmakers decided to change it to Dawn of the Dinosaurs, most likely to clue in the audience what the movie will be about. The movie's antagonist, a giant albino baryonyx named
Rudy,
has 2 interesting bits of trivia. One is that the filmmakers wanted to deviate from the T-Rex as the main villain in a dinosaur cliché, so he was designed as a baryonyx due to that dinosaur species' head resembling a crocodile, which DeSev thought was even more frightening than a T-Rex. The other is that his rivalry with Buck was inspired by the famous Herman Melville novel Moby Dick, with Buck as Captain Ahab seeking retribution from a giant white creature, which in the book's case is a whale, after said creature dismembered a certain body part he had. Buck, however, was named after Captain Ahab's first mate, Starbuck. Speaking of Buck, he was originally going to be voiced by, get this, Harrison Ford. Yep. Indiana Jones himself was going to have a voice acting role for once in his life. However, piggybacking on what I just said, Ford had to say no due to scheduling conflicts as he was busy playing Dr. Jones again in his 4th movie that was released in 2008, Indiana Jones and the Kingdom of the Crystal Skull. To those who are disappointed, I wouldn't feel too bad because a decade later, Ford got a chance to finally do a voice acting role as Rooster the tough sheepdog in the Illumination movie, The Secret Life of Pets 2. Back onto Buck, when Ford wasn't able to voice him, the people at Blue Sky hired British actor Simon Pegg for the role. However, I am curious as to why Pegg didn't have the same scheduling conflict excuse like Ford did, since he was also playing the role as Dr. Montgomery Scott, aka Scotty, in the 2009 reboot of Star Trek, which came out nearly 2 months before Ice Age 3. Anyway, like what would have happened with Harrison Ford, and sorry to repeat myself again, Buck was Simon Pegg's first voice acting role. Others that had the honor was Kristen Wiig, who voices a beaver that Sid mistook for being with Child.
Oh, I see someone else who has a bun in the oven.
Oh, I'm not pregnant.
Ow!
And Bill Hader, who voices that gazelle that Diego chases at the beginning of the movie.
Woo! My hooves are burning, baby. They are burning.
Speaking of the voices like Chris Wedge does with Scrat, Carlos Saldanha and producer Karen Disher voiced 3 dialogueless characters for the movie. Saldanha voices the T-Rex infants Egbert, Shelley, and Yoko, and Disher voices Scrat. Also, the scene where Buck, Crash, and Eddie fight off the pterodactyls was supposed to be longer, but was cut due to time constraints. Speaking of that scene, it seemed to be heavily inspired by the climatic battle scene in Star Wars, A New Hope. Adding into this is that Simon Pegg is a fan of the original Star Wars trilogy. This was the first Ice Age movie to be released in 3D when it hit theaters, but also the last Ice Age film and the last Blue Sky film to be shot in a 185.1 aspect ratio. The movie was released on July 1st, 2009. And on a minor note, if you've been paying attention in these videos, this is the first Ice Age along with the first Blue Sky movie that was released in a month other than March, and the remaining Blue Sky films followed suit. Anyway, like The Meltdown, got mixed reviews alongside a 46% on Rotten Tomatoes. The critics praised the animation, especially on the dinosaur, but found the story to be monotonous and tiresome. Despite this, Roger Ebert gave the movie 3.5 out of 4 stars and proclaimed that Ice Age: Dawn of the Dinosaurs is the best of the 3 films about our friends in the interspecies herd of plucky prehistoric heroes, and it involves some of the best use of 3D I've seen in an animated feature. For the box office, though, again, like The Meltdown, it fared better. It managed to receive $886.7 million on a $90 million budget, earning $13,791,157 on its opening day in 4,099 theaters in America, before being upgraded to $41,690,382. But it was marked as having the lowest grossing first weekend for the franchise, although it was released on a Wednesday, which burned off attendance until the weekend came by, but this was soon updated to $151.7 million. The rest of the earnings came from its release from other countries, with the exception of Spain and Australia. It also became the 3rd highest grossing movie in 2009, falling behind Harry Potter and the Half-Blood Prince and Avatar. The movie got nominated in 2 categories at the 8th Visual Effects Society Awards, one for Outstanding Animation in an Animated Feature Motion Picture, and the other for Outstanding Animated Character in an Animated Feature Motion Picture, with the character of Buck. The movie also received a tie-in video game that was published through Activision that featured Sid and Diego telling the movie's events to an infant Peaches and you as the gamer playing out the film's events in 15 levels. The video game was released 2 days before the movie on June 30th of 2009 for the consoles Xbox 360, Wii, PlayStations 2 and 3, Windows computers, and Nintendo DS. Like the movie, the reviews of the game were mixed with sites like IGN, giving the game a 6.5 out of 10. The song that Queen Latifah sung for the movie, Walk the Dinosaur, was from the band Was Not Was, that was released in 1987 for their album What's Up Dog. It was featured in many dinosaur-centric projects like a music video for the Flintstones. And on a minor note, one scene in the movie parodied Fred's iconic dinosaur slide alongside his catchphrase in the 1992 Super Mario Bros. Movie, which also featured Sid's actor John Leguizamo. Nearly 3 years later in 2012, when the 4th movie Ice Age: Continental Drift was on the horizon, Dawn of the Dinosaurs was converted into a 14-minute short while being shown in 4D called Ice Age: Dawn of the Dinosaurs. The 4D experience that was produced by Simex iWorks and premiered in May of the aforementioned year at the San Diego Zoo 4D Theater. As of June of the same year, it is currently being shown at the Roxy Theater at the Warner Bros. Movie World in Australia, and since July of 2012, at the Shed Aquarium's Phelps Auditorium in Chicago. Unlike the previous Blue Sky movies, people did not have to wait until the ending months of the year this film was released in as 3 months later, on October 27th, Ice Age. Dawn of the Dinosaurs was released on DVD and high-definition Blu-ray in North America. 2 DVD versions of the film were released, a single-disc DVD and a Scrat Pack double DVD box that came with 3 Scrat games. The 3-disc Blu-ray combo included a Blu-ray, a single-disc copy, and a digital copy, as well as a digital storybook maker with commentary by Carlos Saldanha, deleted scenes, making of featurettes, the 2 Scrat shorts that came with the home media of the first 2 films, and a tutorial with the filmmakers who show you how to draw Scrat. A Blu-ray 3D version of the movie was exclusively available with purchase of select Panasonic's television sets between May 16th and July 10th, the following year in 2010, before it got a wider release on August 30th, nearly a month after. Later on, September 21st of 2010, a 3D DVD version was released as a 2-disc set, with the first disc being the Treoscopics 3D, which is a green magenta anaglyph version, and the second disc showing the 2D version. Now, let me talk about my personal relationship with the film. I was pretty frightened when I saw the first promo of Mama Dino standing behind Manny, Sid, and Diego, so much so that I prefer the teaser poster where Mama Dino looks at them on the sideline with a menacing grin. However, that didn't stop me from seeing the movie, and after seeing it, I actually liked it and was most likely happy to get it on DVD not long after the film came out. Ice Age, Dawn of the Dinosaurs has, as of present day, more or less faded into obscurity as being a middle-of-the-road movie for the franchise. But the movie was enjoyable enough as it is, to the point where the title of the movie was warning us that since this was the last Blue Sky movie to be released in the 2000s decade, we would see the dawn of a new era for Blue Sky in the 2010s.